Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Psychedelics, Sacred Medicines, Soul's Purpose and Business, integrating visionary experiences into heart-centered entrepreneurship. I'm Beth Weinstein, spiritual business coach, helping you align with your purpose and grow your business so you can help more people, share your unique medicine, and make a difference in the world doing work that you love. And our interview today is with Dr. José Stevens. Hi, José. Thank you for being here.
Hi. Nice
So good to have you. So José is the president and co-founder with his wife, Lena Stevens, of Power Path Seminars and School of Shamanism, an international school and consulting firm dedicated to the study and application of shamanism and indigenous wisdom to business and everyday life. José completed a 10-year apprenticeship with a Wiraktika Huichol Maricame. I hope I didn't chop that up too much.
It's Wisharika.
Wisharika, the Huichol macrame in the Sierras of central Mexico, and has since gone on to study with other Toltec traditions, as well as traditions from the Amazon, Andes, and Europe extensively. He has a doctoral dissertation from CIIS focusing in on the interface between shamanism and Western psychological counseling. And since then, he has studied cross-cultural shamanism around the world to distill the core elements of shamanic healing and practice. And as an international lecturer and consultant, he has worked with a huge range of individuals and businesses to help them discover their most effective path of service and success. And he's also an author and a master teacher with over 45 years of experience. In addition, is the author of numerous articles and 29 books, including The Power Path, Secrets of Shamanism, Transforming Your Dragons, and Praying with Power. And you can check out his links right here below the interview and download his free gift. José, there's a lot more of your bio that I left out because it's just so extensive and you've been up to so much. I would love you to share a little bit of your story. How did you come onto your soul's path? How are you living your soul's purpose?
Well, it really all goes all the way back to when I was a little kid. And my grandmother from Mexico used to take care of me. And she was raised in a hacienda in Mexico. And she was raised mostly by the servants, who were native peoples. They were the indigenous peoples from the area, people from the Wisharika tribe, for example, that I studied with. And so she used to regale me with stories about them and their teachings and their approach to healing. And she learned a whole lot of things from them when she was a kid. And she started teaching me those things when I was small. And so that sort of got my interest up from the very beginning. My parents would sometimes say, well, your grandmother's a little senile, she's a little old, and you can't believe everything she said, but I actually understood what she was talking about. And so that's how things started for me. And then I had a fairly ordinary childhood. I was raised in Hollywood. And then, I got a degree in sociology when I went to school, and decided to go to social work school and become a psychotherapist. So I did that for a while. And then I met this healer from Mexico who was from the Wisharika tribe. He didn't speak any English. He didn't even speak Spanish very well because he spoke his native language, so we had a little challenge there. We both spoke Spanish poorly, but we started to work together, and that began a 10-year apprenticeship, which I didn't really know I was getting into, but that's what it evolved into. And that it required many, many trips down to the deserts in Mexico. And it was something he didn't want us really to talk about it. So I wasn't able to tell anybody I was doing it with my wife, Lena. We were a couple, learning this body of knowledge. And eventually he passed on. But he said, well, I can't really teach you anything. It's the land itself that teaches you. It's nature that teaches you. And they're peyote people. So we took lots of peyote. And he said, the medicine will teach you everything you need to know. And, I didn't believe him for a while, but it was all true. So it was a pretty amazing experience. And from then, I went back and got my doctorate at CIIS at the time, which had a department of, where there were a number of faculty members that were knowledgeable about shamanism, and Michael Harner, people like that, Angeles Arian, Ralph Metzner, they were all on my dissertation committee. And so I was very fortunate, very lucky. And that's really how things all started for me. And now we have this school that we called the Power Path, because the shamanic path is a power path. And most people don't really understand this, but shamans all over the world have an understanding that that everything is on the power path. Even blades of grass, insects, animals of all kinds, human beings, we're all on the power path. And that doesn't mean that we're trying to become powerful over other people or dominate the world. It actually means that we're trying to accumulate enough power from nature to be able to reach our highest possibility in this life, to be of service, to be productive, to not only survive, but thrive. And it takes a certain amount of power to get that done, to do that. And there's so many things that can rob us of power, distractions, and all the addictions, and you name it. So the shamanic path is about cultivating personal power. And so that's really central to what my wife and I teach other people about the body of knowledge that shamanism embodies. Anyway, that's
Great. No, this is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all this. And wow, you studied under such amazing teachers and had all these mentors around. And thank you for clarifying what shamanism is all about. I think there's a lot of people who don't really understand what it is and why it would help us. I'm curious, how does this walking the shamanic path, whether it's someone who's just curious and, maybe studies it for fun versus someone who dedicates their whole life to it, how can this help someone really get in touch with, what their soul is here to contribute to actually thrive, not just survive? Because I think there's a lot of that whole programming around survival and just kind of being part of the rat race. But then there's, people that know that we're here for more than that. How can shamanism help that thriving, and, what can someone do?
Well, shamanism supports the idea that we really all have a mission. We're here for a purpose. It's not just random that we show up here as human beings. There's a kind of purpose behind it all. And each one of us have a specific set of talents and abilities that can turn into a specialty. And part of the secret is finding out what that is. And a lot of people, they complain, well, I don't know what I'm here for. I don't know. How do you figure that out? Well, it's actually very simple. And this is what I love about the shamanic path, is that it really approaches everything in a very simple way to understand. It's very simple. You say, well, look, first of all, you wouldn't have a life task that you have no talent for. So you can skip all those things that you don't have talent for, right? And you wouldn't have a life task or a mission that you didn't like. So you can throw all those things out. So it's something that when you do it, that you experience like enthusiasm or inspiration or some joy. It's fun and it's exciting. And when you do it, other people notice that you're doing it and they go, wow, I really like that you do that. Can you do some of that over with me? So we're talking about something that's so natural. It's just, how can you miss it? Some people are great at music. Some people really have a talent for public speaking and entertaining, and other people are really good at organizing and so on and so forth. Okay. So I know what my life task is. My life task is to be what's called a pivotal facilitator, which means that when I work with people, it's like billiard balls, it's like when two billiard balls meet, they go off in different directions, right? And so, when somebody comes to work with me, I understand that my mission is to help them to go off in a new direction, one that they haven't found yet. And that helps me enormously. It provides clarity to what I'm doing with somebody. Might involve healing, but that healing will help them to discover new things about themselves and go off in a new direction. So, or it could be that they, they're confused, they need some straightening out, they need some clarity, whatever works is part of that mission. So everybody's got that mission, and it's just a question of opening your eyes and looking and seeing what works, what's fun, what do I do when I do it, what opens doors, opens windows of opportunity, brings people to me. Well, if I tried to be a musician in this life, nobody would come. Because I love music, but I don't, I'm not a musician, and I'm not a businessman. I mean, I've got to have some knowledge of business to run my business and help other people with theirs. But I'm not a big entrepreneur. I'm not a big investor. I'm not in the money game. That's not where my particular talents lie. Yeah. So knowing what your life task is, knowing where your service lies, isn't all that difficult. Mostly it's getting the garbage out of the way, what we were taught, what other people want for us, what other people think we should be doing because it makes more money, or it, it'll get us a better position in the company or whatever. That ain't it. It's all about, what satisfies me. And so that's the case for every person. I mean, what you're doing now, at this moment, you're interviewing me, but that's because you're good at it and you like to do it, right? I mean,
I like to do it.
Yeah. So it's natural. So that's
I don't know if I'm good, maybe, but
I think you are.
It is natural.
That's where to start.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, because there's a lot of people listening that are really questioning what their purpose is. And, I get a lot of clients, and there's just a lot of people in the audience that come to this place, especially the last few years, of really questioning, what am I doing? What is this all about? Especially, the world has been turned around. I think people are really questioning the path they're on. I get a lot of clients who are kind of in their midlife range that are maybe have already had the material success, but are really feeling unfulfilled or, stuck and feeling like something's off. And then, a lot of people maybe turn to sacred medicines or have some kind of profound, non-ordinary experience, whether it's, you know, with or without medicines, and start to realize like, wow, maybe it's my job or my career that's making me feel this bad. But I'm curious, you know, you touched upon some of the issues that have come up where I hear this a lot. People feel like there's something else inside of them, or they're feeling a calling, but then they're afraid to make even small steps, or they don't feel good enough, or they feel like an imposter, or maybe they start, but then they don't feel deserving of receiving money for their healing work. I'm sure you've heard this over the years as well. It seems to be, I keep saying it seems to be a major like pandemic out there, especially in the Western world, where people are really stuck in this cycle of maybe, you know, doing the work that keeps them surviving, but then they feel depressed or anxious, and then they turn to something else thinking, well, maybe if I, you know, take mushrooms, it'll get rid of my anxiety or depression. But maybe at the root of it all is that they're not really living this depth of purpose. And then when they go to live their purpose, they have all these, you know, the programming that's in the way. I mean, have you seen this over the years? And what do you say to people when this comes up?
Oh yeah, you know, this is like an epidemic, okay, in the way in people's thinking. So you actually sparked a number of things here. So one thing is that people have a lot of considerations. I used to study with a Korean Zen master for when I was in my 20s, and he didn't speak English very well, but people would ask him many questions, and he'd say, "Oh, too many thinking, too many thinking." And he'd point to his head, you know, "Too many thinking, put it all down." He said, "Only go straight, just go straight. Keep don't know mind." And those were four simple phrases that sort of summed up the essence of Buddhism, of Zen Buddhism. You know, it's like people think too much. They have too many considerations. All those considerations spark fear. And then fear takes over and prevents people actually from doing what they might have done. You know, it's going to take some risks. And it's going to, if you want to succeed at anything in this life, then you're going to have to be the price of power, according to the shamanic path, is your own comfort. So you're going to have to trade in some of your comfort zone, your desire to feel secure and comfortable all the time. If you want to grow, you have to give some of that up. It's a trade. So it's okay, from the shamanic perspective, it's okay to allow yourself to be uncomfortable with some of the moves that you make. You know, it's uncomfortable to take a test for your driver's license, but if you want to drive, you know, it's part of the initiation. Initiations show up. They come. If you're on the right track, you will be tested to see whether you're serious or not. And if you know, like run away at the first sign of discomfort, you're not going to pass your initiations. You're not going to move forward on your life task work. So you mentioned there that people often look to medicines, to plant medicines, to have some kind of an experience so that they can maybe discover, you know, something deeper about themselves. And in the shamanic path, altered states are very important, because basically what they're saying is that if you try to solve a big problem in your life, or if you try to challenge yourself, it's going to be very difficult if you're coming out of the same model as that created the problem. Okay, I'm not the first person that said that. So what you need to do, altered states provide a step outside that model or that system or that pattern of thinking or way of approaching the world. They offer you a step outside of it. And that either can be plant medicines, and in shamanism, there's lots of plant medicine work, many different medicines that are used for that purpose. But they also use many other methods like chanting, dancing, running, singing. There's so many things that can allow you to take that step outside of your ordinary reality. I use a little self-hypnosis all the time, every day. Every day, when I need to look at something fresh, I just quickly do a little hypnotic technique and put myself into a slight trance state, a little altered state, mild, but it's enough to give me that new perspective that I need to see this in a novel way. Okay, so I mean, you could take mushrooms, you could take peyote, you could, and they're very useful for that purpose. But you can't just go every day, and use those methods. You need smaller, like tools for the job each day. And you can learn those tools, little trance states that can be generated by a little process that you can do. So I always like to give a plug for altered states. And it doesn't matter how you produce them, as long as you're comfortable stepping outside of your usual framework so that you can see questions, topics from a fresh place. And we need to do that often, like all the time.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And I'm also really glad you spoke about initiations. You maybe saw me going like this, like, oh, because I've had so many over my life. And, especially in entrepreneurship in the last 10, 12 years that I've been an entrepreneur. And I say this all the time to clients. It's part of the growth, and it's not easy, but it's that discomfort. And, you mentioned that some people want to really maybe just stay comfortable in these secure, whatever it is, maybe it's a job. But then I always say, look, like, what is truly secure? Like, what does that even mean? And none of this is really, like, in the end, it's just an illusion of security, especially maybe people think like a certain job is guaranteed forever and then it's not, or the world has changed. And, so it's kind of like the only thing that's truly secure is within us, right? And even then, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you brought this up. And now I'm curious, you've written these books around the power path and around integrating shamanism in business, which I'm curious, did anyone, when you first came out with this book or this work around shamanism integrated into business practices, was there criticism because, maybe shamanism is considered, traditional ancient wisdom, and it's certain indigenous practices, and business is this, capitalistic thing? Like, how do you come to terms with these two worlds and bringing them together?
Well, business is what many people do every day. It's huge. It goes on in every culture all around the world. Sometimes people don't call it business, but it's the business of living. It's the business of taking care of your family. It's the business of farming, or the business of, that might be rather sophisticated, like we have in corporate America. But you can't just ignore it or dismiss it with a wave of your hand as if that, wasn't an important thing. It's very important. It consumes a great deal of people's lives. So why should shamanism be over here and business be over here? And this thing that you're spending a huge amount of your time doing is unrelated to shamanism. That makes no sense to me. That's kind of crazy. It's like if shamanic practice is really worth its weight in, it's worth its salt, then it has to apply everywhere across the board. It's the same with any spiritual path, actually. And shamanism is the world's oldest spiritual path, and it's universal. It's in every continent of the world, and it hasn't been stamped out yet. So it has survival power. So I look at all that and I go, okay, this is an important path. It deserves to be, it has something to say about how one lives their life and how one approaches everything they do. And that includes business. So just because business is about productivity, or it's about selling things, or it's about, unfortunately, it's the deal about making money has been exaggerated to a place where it's actually unhealthy. Business should be satisfying, should be like a way to serve, oneself, but also serve the people, so that everybody wins. There's a benefit across the board. Some people run their businesses like that. It's really good to see that. And of course, we know that sometimes that doesn't happen. So I try to work with people that want to do that, that are interested in that approach to business. And then there's a lot of shamanic techniques that are really, really helpful. The whole business about if you want to become powerful, then you have to be with something that's more powerful than yourself. You have to be with people that are more powerful than you are. So you better, if you're the boss, you better hire people that are better at everything than you are. I mean, isn't that a good idea? Why would you want to hire people that were like less skilled than you were? That makes no sense, just so that your ego can feel good. You want the best people around, people that like can answer questions you can't answer. Okay, so there's that. Shamans spent a lot of time with powerful things like the sun. They go out and bathe in the sun. They go out into the forest. They go and sit next to a big canyon or on the beach next to the ocean. They know they're going to accumulate energy and power from these big natural, having a star bath in the middle of the night, things like that, climbing a big mountain. Shamans are always doing stuff like that because they know that's where the power is. So if you're in business, where is the power really? The power is in the marketplace. The marketplace is huge. I mean, that's where if there's no marketplace, there's no business. Nobody notices that for some reason. I don't know. It's crazy. But it's the shamanic principle. It's like, you want to be successful in business, then you need to hang out in the marketplace. You need to know those people. You need to know what they want. You need to know how to serve them. I mean, doesn't that just make sense? This is practical stuff. It's not rocket science. But people get so distracted with their greed that they forget the important stuff, the stuff that really makes it all happen. It's like, so anyway, those are a few off the top of my head that I can think of that, applied to business. If you're in business, you have constant initiations. There's tests, regular tests, some competition comes up. Oh, that's a new test. Are we going to do with that? Are we going to do with a changing marketplace where the different fads come up and people want this color instead of that color now? So we have to address that. It's like paying attention to the challenges, enjoying the process, having fun with it. And this gets into a whole nother territory, which is related to the shamanic path, but communication is enormously important in business. You know, how you communicate, how you teach, how you know, shamans are trained. If you go into indigenous communities and you look at the shamans there who are working with those people, they have specific training in a number of areas. For one thing, shamans usually occupy a position of leadership in their communities, in their tribe. They're trained and taught to take responsibility and to look out for the tribe, to look out for their well-being. You know, where are the herds that they need to hunt so that the people can eat? What's the weather going to be like? What's the season coming up? How big of a winter is it going to be? Well, a shaman has to know those things. They have to be able to prophesy. They have to be able to read the signs. They have to be able to know, hey, it's going to be a big winter. We better get down to lower ground and go where the herds are because it's going to be really cold this winter, and so on, like that. So shamans have training in leadership. They have training in art because they're very artistic and they make all their sacred objects and their offerings and so on. They're trained in storytelling, which is a big part of business. Business is about storytelling. It's about telling stories about your own products. And, you know, it's a huge piece. People don't get that. Okay. So, shamans are trained in ceremony, how to conduct ceremonies. You think there's not ceremony in business? There's a lot of ceremonies. They just don't realize that they're having them because they're a little divorced from, you know, but there's a lot of ceremony in business. People are trained in healing techniques. Sometimes you have to heal your company. Sometimes you have to heal the departments that are in conflict with each other. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to heal an individual who's having a really hard time and they're in over their head, and you bring them in and you talk to them and you set them straight and you take some of the pressure off them and they get back there and they can get back to work. So, you know, there's all these components of the shamanic path. People don't realize what's involved. It's everyday life stuff. People like to think of it as exotic. It's not so exotic after all. It's the stuff of life. So, you know, so how do you deal with the stuff of life? Well, that's going to determine how well you do in business. It's very simple. You treat people with respect, communicate well with them, do little ceremonies for them once in a while, you know, if they need that. You know, use your storytelling capacities to inspire them and get them moving. All that stuff translates across the board right over.
Wow.
Anyway.
No, this is great. You know, it's so amazing that all these, you know, the shamanic techniques and tools, and you mentioned something that's so profound. And I'm constantly saying this to my clients as well, that it's so much more simple than we think. I think humans like to make it very complicated because everyone thinks it should be complicated, but it's really very simple, you know, like tapping into your heart, feeling what's true, what's coming through, you know, like you mentioned, it's natural. It's, you know, you already like doing it. But I feel like, and I went through this myself many years ago, where there's just a lot of this programming that believes, you know, we're not here to enjoy life, or we're not here to make money doing something we love, you know, because I think a lot of us associated money, you know, making money and having a living with like hard, grueling work versus work that it's actually enjoyable. And it doesn't mean, you know, we don't work hard. It just means like, yeah, I get to enjoy it and do what comes naturally that feels very like soul aligned, and also be supported. But a lot of people have trouble accepting that those two things are actually possible, you know, because I think just maybe it's our society or centuries of, you know, programming or whatever it is. I don't really know. I've spent years trying to explore like what is wrong here. But
well, what's wrong is that we've been programmed to be fearful.
Mm.
That's a whole topic of its own. We could talk all day about that, but let's just say that that's driving everything, is fear. And fear, if you're driven by fear, then you will always end up suffering.
Mm.
It'll just always go that way. So that's not fruitful.
Mm.
So one of the things about the shamanic path is it's not that we should never be afraid, because fear is, it's to some degree natural for survival. But we should keep it to a minimum and use it only when it's, survival oriented, right? Tiger comes, run. You don't even have to be afraid. You just do what has to be done, right? So yeah, we've been taught lies. We've been lied to, basically. And we've been taught that we should suffer, that life is hard, and there can be no pleasure in work and things like that. That's all crazy. It's the opposite, in fact. Well, we're here to my point of view on that is that we're here to express spirit. Each one of us is an expression of spirit. So why would we want to express a lot of negativity and pain and suffering? Is that what we want spirit to experience through us? I don't think so. It's just the opposite. Spirit likes to celebrate. So shouldn't we be doing things that are a celebration, like, as much as possible? Now, this business about, like, you shouldn't charge money for doing what you love to do, or you shouldn't charge money for things that you could regard as shamanic. Mm-hmm. That's a complete misnomer. I mean, there's a lot of idealism around that and a lot of romanticism. But the truth is that in every culture throughout history, the local shamans have to eat too. They have families they have to take care of. So there's always been some kind of an exchange. They often didn't have money, so they had goats and they had chickens and they had corn and they had things to trade. And so they would give the shaman a blanket or maybe a horse, or there was always some kind of transaction. It's not true that they were never paid for their services. They had to be paid for their services in some way or another in order to survive. It's just, now these days, we've abstracted all that stuff into dollars and, abstract money, but it comes down really to the same thing. We all need to eat. We all have rent to pay. We all have, life expenses. How are we going to do that? There was a wonderful shaman, Rolling Thunder. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but Rolling Thunder was a Native American. He was a great shaman. He used to hang out with the Grateful Dead a lot. But he worked for the railroads, and he spent long hours working for the railroads just because he had to take care of his family and survive. And so it took an awful lot of time away from his shamanic work. And he was an excellent shaman. He could have been healing people, doing all kinds of great things, but he couldn't do as much as he might have because he was always working for the railroad. Mm. And that was a shame, that somebody with that kind of talent, that kind of ability, he could change the weather. He was really powerful, but, he was doing something he had to do in order to feed his family. I don't think it should be quite like that. We find somebody with that kind of talent and ability, they should be able to do that. We should just provide for them. Anyway,
so glad you brought this up and talked about like the romanticizing of, because this has actually come up in a few other interviews, like this romanticizing of indigenous cultures and pretending that they completely live off the land and they don't need money, and traditional practices shouldn't be paid for, or healing should be free. And it's like, well, we forget the reality of, we live in this world where we are today. And I've been in indigenous communities, and they still need gasoline for their scooters and motorcycles. They still actually do need clothing for their children. They do actually live in houses. They're not living in, thatch mud huts that they built by hand necessarily, not always, So I'm glad you brought that up. And really, because it's definitely come up a lot in the medicine world and the psychedelic space as well, because we're all trying to navigate this kind of a new realm that we're entering into, with now so many people interested in it, and trying to get this balance of being of service and also being supported back, so that we're thriving in order to then be able to better serve.
Exactly. You know what I like to tell people that I counsel is, I say, look, you're paying for my time. Mm-hmm. You're not paying for wisdom or healing, or that's free. You're just paying for my time. Mm.
That's a good one.
You want half an hour of my time? That costs this much. You want an hour of my time? It costs this much. Mm. But what we do at that time, that's up to you.
Yeah. Well, Jose, I want to leave you some time to talk about your free gift about tobacco clearing protection, and also, what you offer and what you have coming up that you want the audience to know about, anything in the next few months or this year.
Oh, I mostly want to call attention to my website, thepowerpath.com. It's filled with resources, tons of free articles. Talk about free. There's lots of free stuff there. And there's also things for a fee, like webinars and that sort of thing. But it's designed as a, it's an outlet for shamanic knowledge and wisdom, and draws from cross-cultural shamanism. But we talk about many things. And so that's a tremendous resource for people. And you can find out all about the other work that we do on that site. We have a year shamanic studies program, which is we just took the applications, and we're full for this year, but there'll be one every year. Lots of retreats, and have some land outside Santa Fe where we have retreats, and do a lot of stuff in nature. Do medicine walkabouts, solos on the land. I'm leaving tomorrow morning to supervise about 20 people going out on the land for 3 days and 3 nights. So just lots of stuff, it's all incredible learning about the tobacco blessing. The tobacco blessing is something that indigenous people all over the Americas use tobacco, and they regard it as extremely sacred and very powerful. One roadman, peyote indigenous man, said, he was asked, what's the most powerful plant in the world? And everybody thought he was going to say peyote, because he was a peyote guy. But what he said was tobacco. Tobacco, because it's killed more people than any other plant. Mm-hmm. Well, that's because they misused it. People misuse these medicines. You don't want to misuse a medicine, because it'll hurt you. You want to use it right. And so I learned how to use tobacco right from the Shipibo people in the Amazon. Mm-hmm. They use a lot of jungle tobacco. It's really clean, no chemicals and all that. And boy, did I ever learn a lot about what medicine can do. First of all, it carries prayers. It protects you. It can take song. You can take songs and put it into tobacco and put it into a person. There's so many things that can be done with tobacco. It's one of my absolutely favorite plants in the world, although I'm a non-smoker. I never have been a smoker. But I do smoke tobacco for ceremony, you know, that kind of tobacco. And so the tobacco blessing is actually done by Lena, my wife, and she takes people through a wonderful tobacco healing process. She has to do it virtually because it's sound, you know. But tobacco can be used long distance on people. So that's what it is. It's a long distance use of tobacco to bless and heal people. Mm-hmm. And that's the gift.
That's so beautiful. And yes, I feel the same way. I have some tobacco growing in my garden right now and have a mapacho poster over there, and cannot thank mapacho enough.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
José, thank you so much for being here. This is such an amazing conversation. I'm so glad to have you on. And thank you so much for all the work you do in the world, for all the books you've written, all the people you help, and sharing your wisdom and your medicine with so many people.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity to just do a little sharing about my favorite topic.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.